Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el Jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
Can you feel it in the air? That sudden shift of mood? It's the perfect time to shed the winter blues and experience the revitalizing qualities of driving a Lincoln. It starts with the Lincoln Spring Sales Event. So step outside and visit your local Lincoln retailer or Lincoln.com for some seriously mood-enhancing offers on current and past Lincoln models. Your transformation awaits. Learn more at Lincoln.com.
Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph. Let's get into our 2 true crime cases for today. Grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, but most certainly grab your wine if it's the evening. Either way, let's get into it. Our 2 true crime cases for today are listener suggestions. I want to encourage you that throughout season 8, we will be taking in your listener suggestions and then kicking them back to our audience. So if you have one, make sure you reach out via email or on Facebook or Instagram. This case was suggested by Brashan. Shout out to you, Brashan. Our case is about Camille Cupcake McKinney, and it takes place in Birmingham, Alabama in 2019. Now, although Birmingham is a fairly large city, most people who live there say it has a small town feel where connections run deep. You feel like you know everybody in the city, although it's pretty big. In 2019, the city of Birmingham was struck with tragedy when the abduction of Camille Cupcake McKinney took place. Now, Kamille was affectionately known by her family as Cupcake, and it was a nickname that her mother, April, gave to her during her pregnancy with Camille. You know how it is. You're not sure what the baby is just yet, and you're not sure of the name you want. And so April just affectionately called her Cupcake, and it stuck. In 2019, Camille was 3 years old, and she captivated all who knew her. She had a vivacious personality. She had big, beautiful brown eyes, and she was just experiencing the world through her family and capturing all who knew her. According to family, Cupcake was the center of her family's world, and they enjoyed her presence and the joy that she brought to their lives. And her mother, April, remembers her daughter as a Sour Patch Kid. It was just a testament to Camille's complex nature, both sweet and mischievous. I feel like all kids, especially around 3 years old, are Sour Patch Kids. But the blend of qualities made her an unforgettable presence in her family's life. On October 12, 2019, April planned a visit to her cousin's residence at the Tom Brown Village Apartments. It's located approximately about 10 minutes east of the city of Birmingham. While April was inside the apartment complex, her cousin's child and April's older son went outside to play in the front area of the apartment. After about 20 to 30 minutes after visiting with her cousin and going outside intermittently to check on the kids, April decided to tell her oldest son to go and get Camille because they were packing up, preparing to leave. However, the situation quickly took a turn when her son returned back to the apartment to tell his mom that he couldn't find Cupcake. She was missing. Initially, April and her family searched for the 3-year-old, thinking maybe she walked off and she just didn't know where to go. But they soon realized they needed to enlist the help of law enforcement when they couldn't locate her. The case was confirmed as a kidnapping, prompting the arrival of dozens of police officers. Investigators and FBI personnel launched a thorough investigation. One of the first people investigators talked to was an 11-year-old boy who claimed he witnessed a dark-colored SUV and observed a black male exiting the vehicle and placing Cupcake inside before driving away. Other witnesses came forward and reported that someone had lured Cupcake and her cousin with candy before taking Cupcake into the vehicle. Investigators assessed security camera footage from both the apartment complex and nearby businesses to aid in their search for Cupcake. Birmingham Police Detective Jonathan Ross said that he spoke to a 10-year-old at the birthday party who said she saw a man and a woman in an SUV handing out candy and that he saw Cupcake in the SUV crying. Upon further investigation, they also talked to a middle school age girl who told the investigator that earlier that day, a couple in an SUV offered her candy while she was leaving cheerleading practice. So their first lead was obviously this black SUV that had a man and possibly a woman, and that they were offering children candy. And this is how they obviously lured Kamille. But did Kamille know this person that she got into the car with? That was one of the questions. So when investigators talked to April, they asked, was there a possibility that this could be a custodial kidnapping, especially given the fact that Camille's parents had recently ended their long-term relationship? Could it be that her father took her and she knew exactly who this was? However, after a thorough investigation, they were able to see that there was no evidence that implicated Cupcake's father in the incident. And the more media coverage of this missing 3-year-old enraged the community. They wanted to find Cupcake and they wanted to find the perpetrator. Now, Dominic McKinney was Cupcake's father, and he got on the news several times and claimed that his daughter meant the world to him, and he begged the media and the community to help bring back his daughter. On October 14th, 2 days later, the police took 2 people into custody that were people of interest. It was Patrick Stallworth and Derek Brown. Now, I want to say that Derek Brown implies that it is a male, but Derek Brown was a female, and Patrick and Derek were in a relationship. The police later retrieved evidence and obtained warrants for the couple. Patrick had child pornography on his cell phone, and it had nothing to do with the kidnapping of Cupcake, but it was a basis to hold him. Now, Derek had probation revocation, and the charge was kidnapping because she took her 3 children when she didn't have custody. It was believed that both of these people may have been the people who picked up Cupcake, but they were trying to sort through the evidence to see if it was actually them. The community was hoping that any day now, Cupcake would show up. October 16th, the police received a tip that Cupcake could be at a house at Jefferson Avenue. It was about 10 to 15 minutes from downtown Birmingham. However, to the police's and the community's dismay, they did not locate Cupcake at that house. And so they were back on the search to find Cupcake. A week after Cupcake's disappearance, the community decided to hold a vigil at a local church. Cupcake's family, especially her mother, expressed how concerned she was for her daughter. She wanted her daughter to come back home. She commented that she couldn't eat. She couldn't do anything. She was frazzled and on edge all of the time. And her desperation was felt throughout the community because the community felt like if a 3-year-old can be taken from the front yard, then anything is possible. No child is safe. And Cupcake brought together the city of Birmingham, and everyone was desperately looking for her, posting flyers, always on the lookout, hoping to find her alive. The investigation continued and the search for Cupcake became intense because the two people who were being held, Patrick Stallworth and Derek Brown, it became clear to investigators that they needed to look in the dumpsters near the apartment where they lived. And on this particular day, it was trash day. And so the trash men were coming to actually get those two dumpsters when the police officers told them, no, you can't get it. And a head investigator of the FBI actually went through both of those dumpsters. And this is something that usually a head investigator would not do. But this case affected him so much, he felt like he had to be a part of the search team. And it was through his search that he found the remains of Cupcake. And they had to alert Cupcake's family, April, and her father that their daughter was deceased. April Thomas was at loss for words, and she was in complete denial that her baby girl, her 3-year-old daughter, was dead. The police found Cupcake's remains on October 22nd, and by October 24th, they charged Patrick and Derek with capital murder and kidnapping. It is believed through evidence that Camille Cupcake died on October 12th, which was the same day that she went missing. The ME determined that she died from asphyxiation. In her autopsy, the ME found meth and antidepressants in her system. They couldn't identify if she was sexually assaulted due to the decomposition of her body. The FBI, through phone tracking, put Patrick at the scene and found DNA of Patrick and Derek on the mattress cover in their apartment. Patrick Stallworth and Derek Brown pled not guilty to the federal charges of capital murder and kidnapping. They had to go to trial, which is so unfortunate for the family. But during the trial, one of the head investigators, Jonathan Rust, testified that Patrick Stallworth admitted to meeting a cheerleader and was passing out candy to children in the vicinity of the birthday party where Camille Cupcake was playing. But he did not mention anything about picking up Cupcake at all. He said that the first time that he saw Camille was at the apartment with Brown. And he said he arrived home to the apartment and that the two were just sitting on the couch and watching television. Jonathan Rust then testified that Stallworth said that Brown wanted to keep her, meaning Camille, and then instructed him to sexually assault her. Patrick says that he went outside and smoked a cigarette and accused Brown of putting her hand over Camille's nose and mouth and then suffocating her. It didn't take juries long to convict Derek Brown and Patrick Stallworth on both counts, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the victim's impact statement, when sentencing occurred, April Thomas told them that they were an abomination and they were the scum of the earth. Birmingham launched the Safe Passage program in Birmingham, Alabama. It focuses on providing safe routes for students, especially those in public housing communities, to walk to and from school. Volunteers and police officers are stationed at various locations along these routes to ensure children's safety. Now, this program was, of course, launched a year after Camille Cupcake McKinney's death to prevent similar tragedies from happening to other children. The case of Cupcake brought a sense of oneness in the community of Birmingham. They rallied together to bring awareness to this tragic case, and they also remedied and found a solution in order to keep the children left in the community safe from the harm and danger that could occur. Let's move on to our next case.
We off?
30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Our next case is a listener suggestion, so shout out to E.A. Richardson on Facebook for suggesting this case. This is the case of Mary Jane Collins. This is going to be a story that will seem very familiar to us all, especially if you're a working person, and whether you have kids or not, we can all get locked down in the mundaneness and routine of life. And don't get me wrong, routine can feel good. You know what to expect. But between the drop-offs of school and the demands of work, trying to figure out what to eat every day for dinner, can we all agree it just seems very daunting and dull? And the case of Mary Jane Collins features a chance encounter that seemed very insignificant, and how everything is not always as it seems. In 2024, Mary Jane Collins was a 23-year-old single mother of 2 young sons under the age of 10. She demonstrated a remarkable resilience and a deep commitment to her children. She recently relocated to Seabrook, Texas, settling into the Teakwood apartment complex, where she diligently worked to create a stable home for her family. Despite the challenges of single motherhood, Mary Jane prioritized her children's well-being, ensuring they had breakfast each morning and made it to school on time, all while balancing her work responsibilities. She also maintained a connection with Michael King, the father of one of her sons, even after his imprisonment. In early 2024, like many dedicated mothers, Mary Jane established a structured routine focused on her children's needs and her own aspirations. She harbored ambitions of returning to school to further her education and frequently visited her grandmother on weekends, cherishing those family moments. Michael King, now 24, was serving time for the 2020 murder of Dwaylan Triplett, for which he was promptly arrested and convicted. Despite his imprisonment, he remained in contact with Mary Jane for the sake of their son. Their communication consisted of video calls, phone conversations, maintaining a cordial relationship focused on co-parenting rather than romance. During this time, Mary Jane's life was going well. She was right in the thick of her routine, taking care of her boys, going to work, and juggling her educational goals. But her life took a turn when she was out running errands. She went to a convenience store to purchase snacks for her boys, and she met a man. He seemed cute, was charming, but she didn't really pay much attention to him. She didn't want to exchange numbers. But over the next couple of days, she kept running into him while she was doing her errands. And she couldn't resist him, and eventually they exchanged numbers. And his name was Dwaylan Hurst. They quickly became an item, and she remarked to her grandmother during her weekly visits that she felt like she finally found the man who understood that her children were her number one priority, and he also took care of her and doted upon her and her children. She finally felt like she found Mr. Right. Like many of us, Mary Jane would brag on social media about her relationship and take pictures of Dwaylan with her boys and the outings they would take with one another. She was enjoying her life. But by late August, Mary Jane's family and friends observed some troubling changes in her routine. She started canceling plans, and she wouldn't post on social media as much. And that just hinted that there were some deeper issues, especially when you're dealing with someone who often posts on social media and then they just stop. It seemed like something was going on with her. And when Mary Jane visited her grandmother noticed that there was a bite mark on her face. And when Dwaylan called her, She flinched upon taking his phone call. And this really suggested that something was going on with her, but no family or friends could really figure out what it was. But it was when one of her friends saw her at a convenience store and she was wearing long sleeves in 90-degree weather. This was unusual, and they didn't understand why anybody, let me be clear, in Texas would be wearing long sleeve in 90-degree weather. When September rolled around, they noticed further alarm bells and red flags inside of Dwaylan and Mary Jane's relationship when they attended a birthday party for her son. They noticed that Dwaylan hovered around her and became very angry when she was talking to a male neighbor. He grabbed her arm, leaving clear indentations on her arm. And this made family and friends speculate that there was some clear domestic abuse that existed inside of the relationship. And as time went on, she began to isolate herself further away from friends and family. But one of the things that she did was she began to take pictures and document the abuse and send it to friends and family. And friends and family wanted to interject. They wanted to call the police, take her away from the abuse. But Dwaylan started to threaten her with her children, that if she did anything, he would harm her children. And she really was caught in between a rock and a hard place. While she wanted to do the right thing, she did not want any harm or danger to come to her children. By early October, the abuse affected her work. She became inconsistent, and when she would go to work, she would wear heavy makeup to cover her injuries. In the final week of Mary Jane's life, she confided in her grandmother that if anything were to happen to her, it was because of Dwaylan. On October 4, 2024, it was a normal day. Mary Jane woke up and took her 2 children to school. Neighbors recounted seeing her, and after she got back, security cameras captured Dwaylan coming to her apartment carrying what appeared to be breakfast around 8:15 a.m. This was a part of their normal routine. By 9 a.m., Mary Jane was sending text messages and making phone calls to some family and friends, and some of those text messages remain unsent. She then decided to pick up her children early from school, claiming that they had a family emergency, and she did that around 10 a.m. Between 10:30 a.m. and 11 a.m., neighbors recalled hearing raised voices and a loud sound. At 11:15 a.m., Michael, her baby father who was incarcerated, called Mary Jane, and this is when Dwaylan decided to drop his facade. When Mary Jane positioned the video camera on her son, Dwaylan got in the back of her son as her baby father was on the phone call. He taunted Michael King and said, "Do you remember me? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember what you did?" Mary Jane, somewhat confused, decided she needed to protect her child, and she grabbed her child from Dwaylan as he began to strike her son. Mary Jane screamed and rushed to shield her child, and the video call immediately dropped. Around 11:30 a.m., neighbors heard a gunshot, or what they believed to be a gunshot, in the apartment. Multiple people reached out to 911, and the first responders arrived. They entered the apartment along with law enforcement. What they found when they entered the apartment was pure chaos. There were tables overturned and the house was in disarray. Upon further entering, they found Mary Jane lying on the floor, and she was deceased. She died from blunt force trauma and a single stab wound. The knife that the perpetrator used was found in the kitchen in the sink. They noticed that Mary Jane fought for her life. She had several defensive wounds on her body, and in the corner laid a broken phone, which disrupted her attempt to call 911. Video footage showed Dwaylan Hurst hurriedly leaving the apartment, going through other properties. Mary Jane's sons were present during their mother's final moments. They were found in their mother's closet, a directive she told them before she was killed. Her older son, who was 9 years old at the time, covered his younger brother's eyes when law enforcement found them in the closet. He whispered in his brother's ear the words that Mary Jane often told her children: "Everything will be okay." Both boys went into the care of their grandmother, and detectives identified Dwaylan Hurst as their primary suspect. It was through the last video call and text messages that confirmed the abuse between Dwaylan and Mary Jane that police made the connection between Dwaylan Hurst, her baby father Michael King, and the murder that took place in 2020. Dwaylan Hurst was the half-brother of Dewan Triplet that Michael King murdered in 2020. And he deliberately set out to target Mary Jane exclusively as a revenge plot on Michael King. He exploited her struggles as a single mother and her ties with King. Hurst strategically presented himself as a supportive and understanding partner, quickly endearing himself to Mary Jane and her family, only to start abusing her and eventually murdering her. Once the police were made aware of this revenge murder plot, they also had a lot more evidence to use against Dwaylan Hurst. They had surveillance footage evidence that he was at the apartment during the time of the murder, and they also found DNA throughout the home and underneath Mary Jane's nails. They discovered that Mary Jane had documented the abuse in a journal, and her last entry on October 3rd suggested that Dwaylan Hurst knew something about her baby father, Michael King, and he wasn't who he was claiming to be. So she was starting to get hip to Dwaylan Hurst's agenda. Despite knowing the true nature of Dwaylan Hurst's revenge plot, he seemed to have seemingly vanished from Seabrook, which triggered an all-out manhunt. He planned to escape using cash and stayed off of social media, so it really made it hard to find him, and he also ceased all contact with his family. On October 28th, police received a tip and found him in a hotel under a false name in Texas City. Arrest was made without incident, and they found evidence that he was planning to leave the country. They also found a video of Mary Jane with her children that he was viewing on repeat when they arrested him. His only words upon arrest is, "King hurting yet?" Mary Jane's grandmother has taken custody of her boys, and both boys struggle from extreme anxiety and severe attachment issues. They are receiving therapy services both away from school and at school. The family has established a trust fund for the young boys, and the community stands in solidarity with Mary Jane's family. In 2025, Dwaylan Hurst remains in custody awaiting trial. He is charged with first-degree murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and multiple counts of child endangerment. Takeaway. My takeaway for the Camille Cupcake McKinney case is one that I feel like we've heard and we know, but deserves to be retold again. So y'all know me, I'm not afraid to say stuff again. I probably repeat myself way more than I would like. But I think we know that we have to safeguard our children. I think we know that. I think our laws reflect that in a lot of ways, but there is no such thing as being overly cautious. And the community of Birmingham really took this case seriously because it was heartbreaking. A 3-year-old who was outside playing with her older brother was taken. And the one thing that April Thomas revealed is that she often beats herself up because she feels like, I didn't check on my kids enough that day. I should have went outside and I should have stayed with them more and I should have done more. And I think as parents, we often carry that burden of we can always do more for our children. But the one thing that the lead detective said is that Ultimately, who was responsible for this atrocity was Patrick Stallworth and Derek Brown. They're the reason why Cupcake is no longer here, and I think that's true. But April Thomas said this, and I think we have to take a warning for her. You just can't leave your kids outside. You have to check on them. The world we lived in as children, or the world that we like to believe that we once lived in that was a little bit more safer, it just isn't. And the initiative that they put forth to have volunteers and police officers standing outside on a shift is a good thing. It's something that I believe all communities should be doing. You know, just to have somebody who's looking out. It's the whole idea of neighborhood watch, but looking out for the kids. And so I think we should take a real hard look at ourselves and what we're doing, myself included, when we send our kids out to play. You need to go out there and sit with them. You need to go out there and watch out for the other children who may be on the street as well. Identify suspicious behavior and report it, because you can never be too cautious when dealing with our children. The case of Mary Jane Collins is one that echoes sentiments of the Monique Ba case that we just covered last week. Mary Jane was a target simply because of who her baby father was. Not anything that she did. She was quite literally minding her own business, taking care of her children. And that is so unfortunate, because the whole reason why Dwaylan Hurst did this was to have a semblance of justice that he didn't feel like he received when Michael King was sentenced to prison time after murdering his half-brother. But really, was that justice? Killing Mary Jane Collins, was that justice? It wasn't. He did nothing but leave suffering in the wake of his so-called justice. And these were young people. And I think that's what's really, really scary to me about the Mary Jane case. She was 23. He was around 23. Do you really understand what you did? Or was your emotional intelligence stunted when your brother was killed and you never got the help you needed to deal with that emotional hurt? That just makes me angry that he left two little boys without the love of their mother. And for what? Those senseless crimes, and the senseless crime of Monique Ba, is just something that you simply just hang your head and just shake it. Because how do you really safeguard somebody like Mary Jane, like Monique Ba? How do you safeguard them? How do you shield them from evil? And there's really nothing I can give you in this takeaway other than revenge is not justice. My deepest condolences go out to the family of Camille, Cupcake, McKinney, and Mary Jane Collins. Let's get into our final Black History fact for this week's episode. Today's Black History fact is about Mary Jane Patterson. Patterson was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, to a freeborn father and a mother who was previously enslaved. She studied at Oberlin College for 4 years, plus 1 year at the preparatory department. Oberlin College was an abolitionist town that admitted African American students starting in 1835. Patterson taught at the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia for 7 years. She became the first Black principal of the preparatory high school for Negroes in Washington, D.C. in 1871. She was a lifelong advocate for Black education and helped found the Colored Women's League legacy. Patterson was a humanitarian who devoted time and money to Black institutions in Washington, D.C. Mary Jane Patterson died September 24th, 1894 in Washington, D.C. She was 54 years old. She never married, instead dedicated her life to educating the descendants of ex-slaves. We hope that the Black History facts that we've shared with you are something new and something that you can share with others. But that is our episode for this week. If you love this episode, make sure you share, if you care, this episode with friends and family. Make sure that you follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black.